This here is the ASUS Hyperion BTF Edition. What does BTF mean? Back to future.
Great Scott!
Alrighty, ASUS. And while yes, this case might look futuristic and a bit gaudy, it actually has nothing to do with this case in particular and more to do with cable management. You'll notice all these extra cutouts in the motherboard tray that normally aren't there, and that's because this is where your cables connect to your motherboard. I know. Sounds kind of weird, right? Other than the PCIe slots, do you see any other connectors on this side of the motherboard? Nope. That's because they're all on the back. Is this not super weird and super cool? Okay, other than this one. So in this video, with a big help from ASUS sending all this hardware, we're gonna build what I think will be our cleanest PC ever. Are you ready? Stay with me. If you're planning your next PC build, then consider checking out our sponsor, VIP SCDkey. Their Windows 10 and 11 OEM keys sell for a fraction of retail and will unlock the full potential of your OS. They'll also remove those pesky activation watermarks. Click the links below to get started today, and be sure to use our special offer code SKGS for a sweet discount on a variety of options, including Windows 10 and 11, Pro and Home, and more. So quick recap then, yes, almost every important connection on this motherboard is on the backside of the board in question, and because of this, you have to use special cases with special cutouts. Otherwise, in a conventional case, you won't be able to secure the board, let alone connect your vital cables. So we have the 8 pins up top for EPS, CPU power. They're in the normal places, again, just flip-flopped on the backside. Same with the 24 pin, USB 3, Type-C. This is our 12-volt high power cable. And again, on the backside of the board, though normally you'd see this on the graphics card, the reason why it's here is because we're using a special ROG graphics card, again, a BTF Edition 4090, that slots into this section of the board as well as the typical 16-lane PCIe slot. This is where the card will get its supplemental power. It's actually run through the board itself in an effort to reduce, again, cable exposure. Now this is a Z790 motherboard, which means it supports 12th, 13th, and 14th gen Intel CPUs. I have a 12900K here that's just begging to be included in a rig, so we're gonna throw it into this socket. I'm gonna raise the retention arm, expose those lovely yet sensitive pins, drop her in nice and gently, and we'll close everything back down. There we go. For memory, how about 32 gigs of Corsair Dominator Titanium DDR5? In they go in slots 2 and 4. I'd ideally like to have 4 DIMMs here, but 2 just keeps things a bit easier. In goes our platform so far. Go with an AIO so I don't have too much to grip on here. And oh yeah. That looks so sleek. I can't wait to see what this looks like when it's all said and done. Almost like these were made for each other, huh, Raymond? And would you look at that? This is actually a lot easier to deal with when you've got cables connected behind the motherboard itself. You can keep these runs a lot cleaner. You don't have to worry so much about making all this look pretty because it's not wrapping around odds and ends of the case. And then you could just tuck that right back into the Velcro there. That is super sleek. Same for down below, front panel. This is a fan connector. We've got USB 3, a second one here for this case. Just plugs right in. And to install our power supply, there's actually no way to do that from the rear because we've got a fan hub and a bunch of other stuff riveted together. This entire basement actually slides forward and then out like so. So obviously we install things from the left side panel. And if you look very closely, the grill on the top of this basement actually has the ROG logo baked in. From the top, it's a little harder to see, but still apparent if you know what you're looking for. Just a subtle attention to detail that I like. But something I'm not a fan of as much, I make no secret of it here, this case is just a little too large, a little too ostentatious, too flashy, it's just not my thing. ASUS does actually though make a BTF version of a much more subdued chassis, something more along the lines of, say, an NZXT like H5 or a Corsair 4000D. I'm interested in building in that because, well, that's gonna be super stealthy if we can get all these components in something that looks a little more conventional. I also find it a bit weird, and maybe we're missing something, but we have 2 Type-C connectors for this case, but the motherboard that ASUS sent only has 1 Type-C port, and it's already connected like underneath there. Yeah, there it is right there. So I don't know, there might be a splitter or something that we should have gotten. I just find it a bit strange. That's all. It's nice that the case has 2, but it's kind of useless. Now we do have to orient this power supply with its fan facing up in order to see the screen here. Not to worry though, the basement does have perforations. Now let's see if I can figure out how to get this back on. that, and all the way back. Oh, this is actually pretty easy. You see those grills we were talking about earlier. Spend a bit of time back here with cable management. Surprisingly easy, there's a lot of space, and you can see, well, it's not bad. And you actually have a lot of extra cabling because you don't have to run as much of it when these connectors are on the rear. Get this little door reinstalled, 2 captive Phillips screws. This will keep all those cables out of the way. Remember, this right side panel as well, I'm not sure if we showed this earlier, is also tempered glass. So you want to keep this clean if possible. So there's one. This bottom one's going to be pretty tough because there's a lot of bulgy cables back here, but it does appear to tighten down without issue. Right, and then right side panel, which, does it go? I don't know how it goes. I think it goes like this. And we just, I'm sure the camera's loving this, Raymond. I bet the focus is spectacular right now.
Oh yeah.
And then we can,
psychedelic.
yeah, we can close that. It's not like you can really see anything in there. How you doing? Oh yeah, left us some plastic peel. That is oh so satisfying. Just some finishing touches then, including our AIO and, well, the big one, the 4090. We haven't even shown them the 4090 yet. It looks sweet. Oh yeah, this is a beefy box. This is the ROG Strix Gaming GeForce RTX 4090 BTF Edition. Now this is only gonna work with BTF Edition motherboards because again, they have the 12-volt high power pass through through the motherboard in question. But this thing is just an absolute chonker, one of the most powerful graphics cards you can buy as a consumer today. Are you ready? Okay, we'll take this off. Okay, this is like difficult to handle with one hand. Raymond, this is enormous. It's like a freaking cinder block. It's just crazy how big graphics cards are nowadays. I think this is the largest card I've ever worked with. Look at that. My, oh my. Just give a few of you heart attacks. Oh yeah, this is the best part. Slow and steady wins the race. Oh, we've even got peel under the peel. Wow, ASUS is doing us a huge solid here. Okay, never mind. This is the really annoying type of peel. We're gonna be here a while, Raymond, I'm sorry.
A few moments later.
In she goes. Let's be careful to make sure everything is aligned. Remember, we have 2 different connections on this board to mind now. We can, oh boy, that was cringy. Let's see.
That did not look good.
No, that was a little cringe. Oh, that's more like it. Okay, clip it all the way in. And then we can use the included graphics card bracket below to keep it supported and stop it from sagging. And this probably won't sag as much even though it's a beefy card because it has a connection further along the motherboard here, that 12-volt high power adapter we mentioned. But yeah, doesn't hurt to have extra reinforcement built into the chassis. I also think it's really funny that this is where the original 12-volt high power connector would have been. Instead, since it's been adapted to the backside of the card, ASUS just put this little like plastic cover here. I mean, it works, but you know, you can see what they did. We're on the home stretch then, just a couple covers to tighten back down and we'll be ready to power on for the first time. Really curious how this is gonna look because there's just less to see. There's less cabling in the way. We're just gonna be able to focus on the graphics card and the motherboard mainly. And that's exciting. Wow. I've got to say, even before we power on, this is something else. It's truly bizarre not having any cable stemming from a graphics card this big. You know, you never have a card this big with this big a cooler pulling power exclusively through a PCIe slot. You always have supplemental power connectors. But here it's all, again, run through the motherboard, which I think is really cool. The AIO tubes kind of disrupt things a little bit. Maybe should have gone with a large tower cooler in hindsight. But all in all, super impressed with this. It is extremely clean. And I think I do stand by my original claim. This is the cleanest PC I've ever built. Is the system in frame, Raymond? Just barely. This is, again, much bigger than I would have ever gone for personally. 9 PCIe slots at the rear instead of, well, 8 in a full tower's case, like a smaller full tower, 7 in a mid tower. So this is definitely on the chonky side, but still looks really good, still looks really clean. So it's connected to power on at the rear. I think, again, we're gonna see some kind of screen or lighting on the power supply side. Let's power on up front. Ah, there it is. Wow. Quite subtle, but I dig it. There's like nothing too bright in here. There was a sneaky debug light. I'm making sure that it goes away. That would be VGA, which is normal because we don't have a display connected to the graphics card. But as it stands, there's nothing in here that's too just eye-catching in a bad way. It doesn't detract from the build overall. Now the case, again, is still just a little over the top for my taste. This case's aesthetics might not be the best, but the design, the layout for these BTF components is spot on, and it made assembly super simple. Whoa, would you look at that? The power supply actually has a little wattage meter showing on its display. That is super cool. So RGB power supply, normally just kind of gimmicky, not something I would go after, but here, since you can actually see it and it has a functional, depending on who you ask, useful screen attached as well. I think it's safe to say no matter who you ask, this is a unique build in that you can't see really any cables apart from the AIO that we chose. If you want to count the tubes as something that is more cable-like, I mean, there's that. And of course the cable stemming from the block itself to power the pump. I think in hindsight, I would have chosen maybe a tower cooler, like a blacked out Be Quiet cooler or something. I think that would have looked really nice here. We were just worried a bit about RAM clearance, which is why we went the AIO route. But still really happy with the layout, really happy with the overall aesthetic, and I really want to build one for myself now. I would never use something this big, but I kind of want to get my hands on the smaller, more like down-to-earth ASUS chassis and maybe build in that. We got to hit up ASUS again. Now I do want to note ASUS is not the only one who reps these kinds of products. I think MSI has also done something similar fairly recently. Gigabyte probably touted something as well. I'd have to go back and check. So they're not the only ones doing this, and well, depending on who you ask, this might be executed better or worse than the competition. Just something to keep in mind. I'll try to have all of these ASUS components linked below if you're interested in building something very similar to this, but also the MSI stuff and the Gigabyte stuff, because I just want you to be more well-rounded in your parts choices and decision making, because these are pretty expensive. I mean, you're only gonna see the BTF stuff, at least at the onset, in the high-end components, things like the 4080s and 4090s, the highest-end chipset motherboards, and premium cases like this, which will cost a pretty penny as well. So something else to consider. What I will say, though, is that I like that this is a thing. I like that it exists. We have more choices at the higher-end market. Maybe that stuff will trickle down to the more affordable stuff later, and then we can start seeing more commonplace cableless builds. We almost titled this video the wireless PC build, but we know how, the comment section reacts to clickbait like that. So we're trying to keep it on the DL. But I mean, come on, it pretty much is wireless. I mean, you can't really see wires at all. That, I think, is impressive in and of itself. With that, let me know in the comment section below what you think about ASUS's BTF Edition components. This isn't all that they have to offer in the BTF range. They do have an AIO that I think is fairly wireless, and again, a couple other components like that other case that we showed you. But this, I think, encompasses pretty adequately what they're trying to get at here. They're just trying to minimize cable exposure. And I think one of the cool side effects of this is that it actually makes things, at least in my personal experience, easier to connect, to install. It's just a lot easier to route and cable manage when you have a case that's also built around these BTF components. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Consider, again, leaving a comment down below, giving this video a thumbs up, checking out relevant links in the video description, and sticking around for the next one. My name is Greg. Thanks for building with me.